I never thought I'd be in the position I am today. 6 years ago, I was a broke college graduate, living in a tiny apartment, working a dead-end job that barely covered my rent and groceries. The idea of becoming an entrepreneur seemed like a pipe dream, something only the lucky or extremely wealthy could pull off. But today, I run a thriving e-commerce business, and I'm here to share how it all happened. It all started in 2018. I was working as a customer service rep at a tech company. The pay wasn't terrible, but it wasn't enough to get me ahead. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I had no savings. I had always had a passion for tech, and I was trying to learn web development on the side, but it felt like I was spinning my wheels. Most of my friends were in the same boat, stuck in jobs they hated, but none of us really knew what to do about it. One day, I was browsing Reddit and came across a post about a guy who built $1 million business selling custom phone cases. I thought to myself, if he can do it, why can't I? The idea of creating something that could generate passive income was so appealing. I knew I wasn't going to invent the next big thing, but what if I could build something around a niche I was passionate about? The idea of starting an online store felt doable, even if it seemed like a long shot. I spent the next few weeks researching. I read every article, watched every YouTube video, and scrolled through countless forums about e-commerce. At first, it felt overwhelming. There were so many platforms to choose from: Shopify, WooCommerce, Etsy, and it wasn't clear which one would be the best for me. But I decided to go with Shopify. It was easy to use, and after watching a ton of tutorials, I felt like I could navigate it with my eyes closed. The next step was finding a product to sell. I wasn't looking for anything revolutionary. I didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel. I needed something small, lightweight, and easy to ship. That's when I stumbled upon custom socks. Weird, right? But hear me out. I'd always been into quirky, unique designs, and custom socks were a growing trend. There were a few brands doing it, but it didn't seem like anyone was dominating the market. I saw an opportunity to create something that was fun and customizable, something that people would want to wear as a statement piece. I found a manufacturer overseas who could produce the socks for me. The quality was good, and the price was right. My initial investment was just under $1,000, which included the cost of samples, a domain name, and setting up my Shopify store. I spent hours designing the website, making sure it looked professional but still fun. I also spent time creating a brand identity, something that stood out in a crowded market. I chose the name Sock It To Me because it was playful and memorable. Once the website was live, I thought my work was done, but I quickly realized that getting people to actually buy socks wasn't as easy as I had hoped. I spent the next few months trying to figure out how to drive traffic to my site. I tried Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, and even paid Google ads. Some things worked, but nothing really took off. What finally started to make a difference was when I got serious about content marketing. I started a blog on the website, writing articles about fashion trends, the importance of comfortable socks, and how to style different outfits with bold sock choices. At first, it felt like no one was reading, but slowly, traffic began to pick up. People were sharing my content on social media, and the website's SEO started to improve. I began to see my first real sales. I still remember the first order that came in. It was a random person, someone I had never met, and they had bought a pair of socks. I was ecstatic. It wasn't much, just a $20 sale, but it was validation. I realized that people were willing to spend money on something I created. It felt like a small victory, but it was the spark I needed to keep going. Over the next year, I made small but steady improvements to the business. I refined my product line, added new designs, and experimented with different marketing strategies. I reached out to micro-influencers who had a genuine connection with their followers, and they agreed to promote my socks for a small fee or free product. These partnerships were more authentic and effective than anything I had done before. The business grew, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of setbacks. I had cash flow problems, inventory issues, and some orders went missing in transit. There were times when I thought about quitting, especially when I wasn't seeing the returns I had hoped for. But I learned that setbacks were just part of the process. Every failure was a lesson, and every challenge made me better at running my business. By 2020, my business had hit a profitable point. I wasn't making millions, but I was making enough to quit my day job and work on Sock It To Me full-time. That year, I invested in paid ads again, but this time with a better understanding of targeting and ad copy. I also launched a subscription service where customers could receive new, limited edition socks every month. This turned out to be a huge success, and it helped stabilize my income. Fast forward to 2023, and Socket to me has grown into a full-fledged business. We have a team of 10 people, including designers, customer service reps, and marketing specialists. Our social media following is in the hundreds of thousands, and we've expanded into other products like custom slippers and beanies. We've partnered with big brands, and our socks have been featured in several fashion publications. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were times I felt like throwing in the towel. But persistence, creativity, and a willingness to learn and adapt got me here. Starting a business wasn't some magical, overnight success story. It was a series of small steps, failures, and breakthroughs. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small. You don't need to have everything figured out from the beginning. Don't let fear hold you back. And most importantly, don't expect it to be easy. Entrepreneurship is hard, but it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do. 6 years ago, I never would have imagined I'd be where I am now. I'm proof that it's possible to go from zero to something incredible, even when the odds are stacked against you. All it takes is one idea, a lot of hard work, and the belief that you can make it happen. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I used to be the kind of person who didn't believe in the hustle culture. The stories about entrepreneurs waking up at 4 a.m., working 18-hour days, and constantly grinding seemed over the top to me. I believed in balance. I thought the best way to succeed was to work smart, not hard. Little did I know that my perspective would be completely flipped, and it would be a series of seemingly small moments that would push me to my limits and show me how resilience is key in entrepreneurship. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents were both teachers, and while we didn't have much, I was content. I excelled in school, not because I was particularly gifted, but because I was driven. I always wanted to prove that I could do more. I went to college on a scholarship and pursued a degree in marketing, though my real passion lay in building something from the ground up. The idea of entrepreneurship always seemed romantic to me, like something out of a movie. The thought of building a company, watching it grow, and eventually seeing it succeed kept me awake at night. However, my early attempts at starting something fell flat. The first was a small clothing line that I thought would take off. I spent months designing, sourcing fabrics, and marketing it to friends and family. But the reality hit hard when sales barely covered the production costs. My dream had crumbled, and I felt like a failure. But the one thing I learned from that experience was persistence. If you fail, you have to get back up. My second attempt was in the tech space. This time, I partnered with a few friends who were technically savvy. We built an app that promised to revolutionize the way people network at events. We spent hundreds of hours coding, tweaking, and testing the app. It looked good on paper, but once we launched it, we quickly realized that there were already dozens of apps doing the exact same thing. We couldn't break through the noise. Again, we were faced with failure, but it taught me a valuable lesson. Timing is everything. No matter how great your idea is, if it's not the right time for it, it won't succeed. After those 2 failures, I was disheartened but determined not to give up. I began to shift my focus from trying to create the next big thing to solving real-world problems. I noticed that in my own city, local businesses were struggling to build an online presence. They lacked the resources to develop a website or create an effective social media strategy. This seemed like a real problem that I could solve, and I felt confident that I could make a difference. So, I decided to take the leap and start a digital marketing agency focused on helping small businesses. In the beginning, it was just me. I didn't have any major investors or a large team. I only had a few years of experience in marketing and a strong desire to help others succeed. I started by reaching out to small businesses in my area, offering to build their websites, run social media campaigns, and improve their online presence. The first few months were slow, but I began to build a reputation as someone who cared about my clients' success. I took the time to understand their businesses and crafted tailored marketing strategies that would work for them. There was a turning point that stands out in my mind. A local coffee shop owner, who had been struggling to get customers through the door, hired me to help with her social media. After just a few weeks of consistent posting and a well-executed advertising campaign, the coffee shop saw a 30% increase in foot traffic. The owner was ecstatic, and her success story spread quickly in the local business community. That was the moment when things started to snowball. Word of mouth brought in more clients, and before I knew it, I had a small team working with me. The next few years were a blur of late nights, tight deadlines, and unexpected hurdles. I went through moments of self-doubt and nearly burned out several times, but I kept pushing. I found that running a business isn't just about marketing or strategy. It's about leadership, managing stress, and handling failure with grace. One of the toughest challenges I faced was hiring the right people. I went through several rounds of hiring and firing before I finally found the right team members who were as passionate about the business as I was. I learned that building a strong team is as important as the product you're offering. Eventually, my agency began to expand. We took on larger clients, and I found myself working with businesses in different industries, from fashion to real estate to tech startups. Every project presented new challenges, and every client had different expectations. But the one thing that remained constant was my commitment to solving problems. I realized that success didn't come from just doing things that were easy or comfortable. It came from pushing myself to take risks, learn new things, and never settle for mediocrity. One of the most rewarding moments in my journey was when we helped a local nonprofit organization that was struggling to raise awareness about their mission. We created a marketing campaign that not only increased donations, but also helped them gain significant media attention. That project was a reminder of why I started my business in the first place, to make a real difference in the world. It's easy to get caught up in numbers and profits, but the impact we had on that organization reminded me that entrepreneurship isn't just about personal gain. It's about contributing to something larger than yourself. As my agency grew, I began to explore other avenues for growth. I started to invest in other businesses and explore passive income opportunities. I learned that diversification is key to long-term success. You can't rely on one source of income, and you have to be open to new ideas and ventures. I also started mentoring other aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing my experiences, and offering advice when I could. One thing I wish I had known earlier in my career was the importance of having a support system. Surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who can provide advice, support, and encouragement is invaluable. Looking back on my journey, I realized that entrepreneurship isn't just about success. It's about the lessons you learn along the way. The failures, the struggles, the setbacks, all of them shape you into the person you become. It's easy to look at successful entrepreneurs and think they had it easy, but the truth is, we all face challenges. The key is to keep going, to keep learning, and to never lose sight of why you started in the first place. Today, my agency is a thriving business with a team of 20 talented individuals, and we work with clients from all over the world. But I haven't forgotten where I came from. I still remember the sleepless nights, the doubts, and the failures that almost broke me. Those experiences are what shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. And while success feels great, it's the journey that has been the most rewarding. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, and it isn't for everyone. But if you're willing to put in the work, take risks, and embrace the inevitable failures, you'll discover strengths in yourself you never knew existed. If I can do it, anyone can. I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in marketing. I had dreams of owning my own business one day, but like many young people, I had no idea how to turn that dream into reality. I grew up in a small town where the idea of entrepreneurship was mostly limited to family-run businesses or people who had inherited money. I didn't have any family connections or a trust fund, so I knew I had to find a way to make it on my own. After college, I moved to a big city with a handful of savings and a huge pile of student loan debt. I took a job as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized company, where I was underpaid, overworked, and surrounded by people who were just as stuck as I was. It wasn't a bad job, but I could feel my creativity being stifled by office politics and the routine of corporate life. There was always this nagging thought in the back of my mind. Is this really all I'm going to do for the rest of my life? The turning point came when I stumbled upon a business idea during one of my many sleepless nights. I was sitting at home, scrolling through social media, when I noticed a significant gap in the market. People were constantly searching for ways to personalize their lives, whether it was with home decor, clothing, or even gifts. The one thing I noticed was the lack of affordable, custom products that people could make themselves. I knew from my marketing background that personalization was becoming a huge trend, and it clicked. I could create a platform that allowed users to design and order custom products online. At first, the idea seemed impossible. I had no technical skills, no funding, and no network to rely on. But something inside me told me I had to give it a shot. I had nothing to lose, and I didn't want to spend the next few decades wondering what could have been. So, I started researching. I spent days on end watching YouTube tutorials, reading articles, and talking to people in the industry. I learned about e-commerce platforms, website design, print-on-demand services, and the basics of running a small online business. I took a leap of faith and started building my website during nights and weekends while still working my 9-to-5 job. I had no idea how to code, but I learned enough to use platforms like Shopify and Etsy to create a simple yet functional website. I also figured out how to partner with suppliers who could print and ship custom products on demand, meaning I wouldn't have to keep any inventory. This was a game changer, as it allowed me to start my business with a very low upfront cost. The first few months were incredibly slow. I made my first sale after 3 weeks, and honestly, I was over the moon. It wasn't much, just a single t-shirt with a custom design, but it was a start. I spent every free moment working on marketing, tweaking my website, and expanding my product range. I used social media to promote my designs, focusing mainly on Instagram and Facebook, where I could show off the custom products and build an audience. Slowly but surely, orders started trickling in. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business. I expanded my product line from just t-shirts to hoodies, mugs, phone cases, and even custom wall art. I got better at targeting my ads, and my audience grew. But there was still one huge problem. I had no brand. I had products, but I hadn't figured out how to make my business stand out in the crowded e-commerce space. That's when I decided to take a big risk and rebrand. I changed the name of my business, redesigned the logo, and revamped the website. I also started offering personalized experiences, allowing customers to create custom gifts for their friends and loved ones. This personal touch made a huge difference. The customers who bought from me weren't just buying products. They were buying something meaningful, something with a personal connection. The rebranding paid off. Sales exploded, and within a few months, I had more orders than I could handle. The best part? I was still working my full-time job, so every penny I made was extra income. It felt like I had found the perfect side hustle, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before I had to make a choice, stay at my job or go full-time with the business. After a year and a half, I made the leap. I handed in my resignation and focused all my energy on my business. This was a terrifying decision. I had steady income, health insurance, and the comfort of knowing exactly what to expect from one month to the next. But I also knew that the longer I waited, the more I would talk myself out of it. I had to take the plunge. The first 6 months after quitting my job were incredibly tough. I had to figure out everything from scaling operations to dealing with customer complaints. There were weeks where I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But there was also something exhilarating about the freedom. I was my own boss, making my own decisions, and working on something I genuinely cared about. One of the hardest challenges I faced was learning how to manage a growing team. At first, it was just me handling everything, designing products, marketing, customer service, and fulfillment. But as orders grew, I knew I needed help. I hired my first employee, a customer service rep, to handle inquiries and issues, and then a marketing assistant to help with social media. Slowly, I built a small team of passionate individuals who were just as invested in the business as I was. Around this time, I realized the importance of creating a strong company culture. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a team, a community, and a brand that people would be proud to be a part of. We focused on transparency, creativity, and customer satisfaction. These values became the foundation of everything we did, from product development to marketing strategies. Fast forward to today, and my company is a multi-million-dollar business. We've expanded to include over 100 different products and have a loyal customer base across the world. I've been able to hire more people, improve our systems, and expand into international markets. I still can't believe how far we've come. Looking back, there are so many things I wish I had done differently. There were countless mistakes along the way, missed opportunities, poor decisions, and moments of doubt. But each mistake taught me something valuable. And if there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of years of hard work, learning from failures, and taking risks. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, I say this: just do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment because it might never come. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. You'll make mistakes, but those mistakes will shape you into a better entrepreneur. And most importantly, don't forget to enjoy the process. It's a long road, but it's worth every step. Let me take you back to a time when I was just another broke college student. I didn't have much to my name, barely enough for rent, and I was always scrambling for the next meal. I thought I had a typical life ahead of me: graduate, get a job, work for 40 years, and retire. But something changed. It wasn't a moment, but rather a collection of small, almost unnoticeable events that led me down the path of entrepreneurship. It started with a part-time job. I was a waiter at a small local restaurant, working evenings and weekends while trying to balance my studies. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I managed. One night, an older man came in and sat at the bar, ordering a drink and chatting with me. He was one of those people who seemed to know everyone and had a wealth of stories. I had heard he owned several businesses in town, including a real estate company and a chain of coffee shops. After a while, he started asking me questions. "So, what do you want to do after graduation?" he asked. "I don't really know," I replied. "Maybe work in marketing or advertising." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem like the corporate type," he said. "You've got a fire in you. You should think about building something yourself." I laughed, unsure of what to say. "What's the worst thing that could happen?" he continued. "You fail, and then you go back to school or get a regular job. But if you don't try, you'll never know what you're capable of." His words stuck with me. That night, as I walked back to my tiny apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I had always assumed that entrepreneurship was for people with loads of money or some magical business idea. But his words made me wonder, what if the reason I was so unsure of my future was because I was too afraid to step outside my comfort zone? That conversation planted a seed, but it didn't immediately sprout. Over the next few months, I focused on my studies and continued my work at the restaurant. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was capable of more. One day, as I sat in a cafe studying for an exam, I overheard a conversation at the table next to me. A couple was discussing how difficult it was to find affordable, healthy food options in the city. They were complaining about overpriced takeout and how difficult it was to maintain a balanced diet when every meal out was loaded with preservatives and artificial ingredients. I don't know why, but something about this conversation clicked with me. I realized that I could solve this problem. I had no culinary experience, but I could create a service that offered healthy, affordable meals delivered to people's doors, something that didn't currently exist in my city. I started jotting down ideas on a napkin, and within an hour, I had a rough business plan. I knew nothing about the food industry, but I didn't know how to research. I started reading everything I could find online about food delivery services, meal prep businesses, and how to start a small company. I spent hours in the library, consuming articles, watching videos, and taking notes. I started talking to people in my community, getting their opinions on the idea. I realized that the hardest part wasn't coming up with the idea, it was actually taking the first step. Fear kept holding me back. What if people didn't buy into my idea? What if I failed and lost everything? But after a few sleepless nights, I decided to go for it. I didn't have much money saved up, so I started small. I used my last $$1,000 to buy basic kitchen equipment and ingredients. I built a website in my spare time and set up an Instagram page to start generating interest. I wasn't making anything fancy, just simple, nutritious meals like salads, grilled chicken, and quinoa bowls. I offered delivery within a small radius, and I kept the prices low to make sure it was accessible. The first few weeks were a struggle. I had 0 clients, and I was working long hours just to prepare the meals. I felt like a complete failure. There were times when I wanted to quit and go back to looking for a real job. But then, slowly, something changed. People started finding me online. Word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I had my first few regular customers. The business began to grow, but it wasn't without challenges. I was still juggling college, working at the restaurant, and running a food delivery business. I had to learn how to manage my time, balance my workload, and deal with customer complaints. But every time I made a mistake, I learned from it. I kept improving my process, finding better suppliers, and offering new menu options. A year later, I was no longer a student. I had dropped out of college to run my business full-time. My food delivery service had expanded, and I had a small team working with me. I rented a commercial kitchen space and started offering corporate meal delivery as well. It wasn't always easy, but every time I faced a setback, I remembered the advice that older man had given me. What's the worst thing that could happen? I'm not saying I've made it or that everything has been smooth sailing, but I'm proud of what I've built. I never would have thought that a conversation at a bar and a random idea overheard in a cafe would lead me to where I am now. There's no secret formula to success, just hard work, persistence, and the willingness to take risks. If there's anything I've learned from my journey, it's this. Don't wait for the perfect moment to start. Start with what you have and adjust along the way. Take risks, learn from your mistakes, and always keep moving forward. And most importantly, don't be afraid to dream big, even if those dreams seem impossible. Because sometimes, it's those impossible dreams that turn out to be the ones that change everything. Looking back, I realized that the moment I decided to bet on myself was the moment everything changed. I still remember the uncertainty I felt back then, but I also remember the thrill of making that first step into the unknown. And now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm still running my business, still learning, still growing. And I'm excited for what the future holds. So, if you're reading this and you're stuck in a rut, wondering if it's worth it to start your own thing, take that first step. You never know where it might lead. It all started in 2017 when I was 28 years old. I was working a corporate job, climbing the ladder, and doing everything I was supposed to do. I had a decent salary, a small but nice apartment, and friends who were starting families or buying houses. From the outside, everything seemed fine, but inside, I was miserable. I hated the idea of working for someone else, building someone else's dream while my own remained a distant, far-off thought. Every day felt like I was spinning my wheels, putting in the effort without seeing any real reward beyond the paycheck. It was at this point that I decided I was done. I had been thinking about starting a business for years, but there was always an excuse: lack of capital, lack of experience, lack of time. I was tired of waiting for the perfect moment. I realized that no moment would ever be perfect. I had to start now, or I would continue to live in a cycle of mediocrity, forever wondering what if. So, I took the leap. I left my stable job, took a huge financial risk, and dove headfirst into the world of entrepreneurship. My idea was simple: create an online store selling premium quality, eco-friendly products. The environment was something I deeply cared about, and I noticed an increasing demand for products that were both functional and sustainable. From reusable water bottles to biodegradable phone cases, I saw a gap in the market and a chance to do something meaningful. At the time, I didn't have much, just a small savings account, a laptop, and a passion to make it work. But I knew I couldn't just throw a website together and expect success. I needed to learn. I dove into every book, podcast, and online course I could find. I spent countless hours reading about e-commerce, branding, marketing, and the ins and outs of running an online business. It was overwhelming at first, and there were many moments when I thought I was in over my head. I started small, way smaller than I initially wanted to. I figured out how to build a basic website using Shopify, found a supplier for my products, and started creating content. My goal wasn't just to sell products. I wanted to create a brand. I wanted people to connect with my values: environmental sustainability, conscious consumerism, and supporting small businesses. The first few months were brutal. I spent every penny I had on product samples, website fees, and advertising. I had no sales. Nothing. Zip. It felt like I was screaming into the void. Every time I checked my website analytics and saw the 0 visitors or 0 sales, it felt like a punch to the gut. But I refused to give up. I kept pushing forward, testing new marketing strategies, reaching out to influencers, and learning from every mistake. Slowly, things started to change. I had my first sale, someone I didn't know, a total stranger who found my site and made a purchase. It was a small victory, but to me, it was everything. From there, it wasn't an overnight success, but progress was happening. I learned how to leverage social media, using Instagram and Facebook to connect with potential customers. I posted consistently, showcasing my products in everyday settings, educating people about the environmental impact of single-use plastics, and offering discounts to my followers. I started collaborating with influencers who shared my values, and over time, they helped amplify my message. Still, the road wasn't easy. I had moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether it was worth it. Cash flow was tight, and there were days when I thought I might have made a huge mistake. But in the back of my mind, I knew there was no turning back. I had to make it work because if I didn't, I would forever regret not trying. The breakthrough came after about 6 months. I had built a small but loyal customer base, and my products were starting to get noticed. I had a handful of repeat customers, and word of mouth was beginning to take off. Then, something unexpected happened. A small, eco-focused lifestyle blog featured one of my products in an article about sustainable living. That article went viral. My website traffic exploded, my inbox was flooded with orders, and I had my first taste of what it felt like to truly run a successful business. That moment was the turning point. I used that momentum to build an email list, which became one of the most valuable assets for my business. I started offering exclusive discounts, releasing new products, and building a community around my brand. My sales grew exponentially, and I quickly realized I needed to scale up. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, hiring my first employees, outsourcing tasks, and expanding my product line. 2 years after I started, I reached a major milestone, $1 million in revenue. I couldn't believe it. It felt surreal to see that number on paper. It was proof that hard work, persistence, and passion could pay off. But even then, I knew I wasn't done. The next step was building the infrastructure to support a growing business. I moved my operations to a larger warehouse, hired more staff, and optimized my supply chain. I streamlined processes, improved customer service, and expanded my product offerings to include a wider range of eco-friendly items. As the business grew, so did my sense of responsibility. I became increasingly aware of the environmental impact my company had, and I worked hard to make the supply chain even more sustainable. I switched to a 100% recyclable shipping packaging, partnered with eco-friendly manufacturers, and even introduced a program where customers could send back their used products for recycling. My brand was no longer just a business, it had a purpose. But of course, entrepreneurship isn't all sunshine and rainbows. As the business expanded, I encountered new challenges. Competition started to heat up, and I had to continuously innovate to stay ahead. There were times when I thought I'd hit a plateau, but each obstacle became an opportunity to learn and improve. One of the most challenging moments came when the pandemic hit. Sales took a massive dip in the beginning. Supply chains were disrupted, and I had to adapt quickly. I pivoted my marketing efforts to focus on the importance of supporting small businesses during uncertain times, and I offered free shipping and extended return policies to help customers feel more comfortable buying online. Eventually, my sales picked back up, but the whole experience reminded me how important it is to stay adaptable and resilient. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From starting in my tiny apartment with no experience to running a successful, purpose-driven company, it's been an incredible journey. There have been ups and downs, moments of doubt and success, but through it all, I've learned one crucial lesson. The only way to fail is to quit. Today, my business continues to grow. We're expanding internationally, launching new products, and most importantly, continuing to make a positive impact on the world. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be one. Start small, learn along the way, and never give up. The road is tough, but the reward is worth it. I grew up in a small, sleepy town where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents were hard-working folks who owned a modest corner store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept food on the table. I remember spending hours behind the counter, organizing shelves, and chatting with the regulars. I always thought the store was a little dull, but it was safe, predictable, and all I knew. At least, that's how I saw it as a kid. My dad would often talk about his dreams of expanding the store, but I didn't really understand his ambition. To me, life was just about getting by. As I entered my teenage years, I grew restless. My friends were talking about all the things they wanted to do, places they wanted to go. But my future felt like a set path, a life behind the counter at my dad's store. I felt like there had to be more than this. In high school, I started dabbling in small online businesses. I'd sell old textbooks, electronics, and things I could buy cheap from thrift stores and resell. I wasn't making much money, but it was a start. The internet was my playground, and it felt like the world opened up in a way that my small town could never match. I had a part-time job at the local diner, and on my days off, I would spend hours learning about e-commerce, digital marketing, and social media. I was obsessed. My parents didn't understand. They thought it was just a phase, something I'd grow out of. My dad would say, "Son, there's no shortcut to success. Hard work and patience will get you further than any gimmick." But I wasn't looking for a shortcut. I just believed there had to be a better way to live. A way where I didn't have to stay stuck in the same town doing the same thing every day. When I graduated high school, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including myself. I didn't go to college. My parents were furious, but I knew this was the only way I could truly take control of my life. I wanted to start my own business. I told myself, if I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail on my terms. I moved to a bigger city and started freelancing in digital marketing. I didn't have any clients at first, but I kept grinding. I took on small jobs wherever I could find them, even working for free just to build a portfolio. I used every resource available: blogs, online courses, forums, YouTube tutorials. Slowly but surely, things started to click. After about 6 months, I landed my first real client, a local coffee shop that wanted to increase its online presence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I built their website, set up social media accounts, and helped them run a small online ad campaign. The results weren't anything groundbreaking, but the owner was happy. More importantly, I realized that I could actually make money doing this. It wasn't just a pipe dream. From there, things started to snowball. I worked with more clients, learned new skills, and grew my business. After a year, I had saved up enough money to hire a small team, a couple of graphic designers, a content creator, and an intern. My first real office was a tiny, cramped room in a shared workspace, but it was mine, and that meant everything. Around this time, I started to get a bit too cocky. My business was growing, and I thought I had everything figured out. I began taking on bigger clients, neglecting the little ones who had gotten me to this point. I was focused on the money, not the relationships. And that's when everything started to unravel. One of my larger clients, a local gym chain, sued me for a failed marketing campaign. They claimed that I didn't deliver what I promised, and they wanted their money back. It was a blow. I tried to fight it, but it became clear that I was in over my head. I had neglected to sign proper contracts, didn't communicate well with the client, and hadn't managed expectations. The whole thing was a mess. The lawsuit drained my savings, and I had to let go of my team. I was back to square one. The business that I'd worked so hard to build felt like it was slipping away, and I was terrified. I'd made some mistakes, but I refused to let it end like this. I took a step back, reevaluated everything, and decided to start fresh. This time, I was going to do things differently. I began reaching out to my previous clients and offering to make things right. I didn't ask for more money or to cover my expenses. I just wanted to rebuild my reputation. Slowly but surely, my clients started to trust me again. Over the next few years, I focused on doing things the right way. I worked with clients who believed in my vision and treated them with respect. I built a solid team, this time with better systems in place to manage projects and expectations. I invested in learning not just marketing, but also business management, leadership, and finance. I started networking more, learning from others who had gone through similar struggles. Then, after 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, I had a breakthrough. I landed a contract with a national brand. They were looking for someone to handle their social media and online strategy, and I was the one they chose. It was the opportunity I'd been waiting for, and this time, I was ready. We killed it. The campaign went viral, and the brand's online sales skyrocketed. It was a game changer. I reinvested the profits into the business, expanded my team, and moved into a bigger office. We started getting bigger and bigger clients. My reputation was solid, and I had learned from every mistake along the way. A few years after that, I sold my business for a significant sum. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than I ever imagined I'd have. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about proving to myself that I could take a risk, fall flat on my face, and get back up. I learned the hard way that success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about how you respond to it. Now, I'm in a different stage of my life. I'm involved in mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them avoid the same mistakes I made. My parents are proud of me, and I've even been able to buy them a nice house. I'm still learning, still growing, and still chasing that next big thing. Looking back, I realized that the small town, the corner store, and my parents' simple life laid the foundation for everything that came after. It taught me the value of hard work, but also the importance of having a vision beyond the day-to-day grind. And that's something I carry with me in everything I do today. No matter how many times you fall, if you keep getting back up, you'll eventually reach the place you've been dreaming of. But it's never going to be easy, and it's never going to be fast. There's no shortcut to success, just a long, hard road of learning, adapting, and never quitting. I always wanted to be my own boss. That idea was something I carried with me since high school, but like most things in life, it never seemed like the right time. I was stuck in the typical cycle of working for someone else, hustling for paychecks, and watching the clock until the weekend. But it all changed one day when I had a moment of clarity, a decision that would ultimately change the course of my life. It all started with a simple observation. I was working at a 9-to-5 job in a small marketing agency, a job I'd been in for a couple of years. The pay wasn't bad, but I didn't feel like I was doing anything meaningful. I was just another cog in the machine. One afternoon, as I was sitting in my cubicle, I overheard a conversation between two coworkers talking about side hustles, something I had heard about but had never taken seriously. They were discussing how they were making money outside of their regular jobs, leveraging their hobbies, and turning them into income streams. One of them was even talking about starting an online business. That was my aha moment. I'd always been passionate about fitness and wellness, and I loved helping people, but I had never considered turning that passion into something more. I went home that night, sat down at my kitchen table, and started brainstorming. I thought about how everyone I knew was obsessed with getting in shape, but many of them struggled with staying consistent. I thought about how I could combine my marketing skills with my passion for fitness to create something valuable for others. After hours of research and planning, I decided I was going to start an online fitness coaching business. But I had no idea where to start. I wasn't a personal trainer. I wasn't a nutritionist. I was just a guy who loved working out, and I had no formal credentials to back me up. But I didn't let that stop me. I believed in the value of the content I could create, and I knew that I could offer something different. My plan was simple: provide free value through educational content, build a community around it, and eventually turn that community into paying clients. The key would be consistency, trust, and offering real results. For the next few months, I worked tirelessly on building my online presence. I created an Instagram account, a YouTube channel, and started posting workout videos, fitness tips, and motivational content. At first, it was slow. I didn't have many followers, and I wasn't making any money. But I kept going. I interacted with everyone who commented, I shared my own struggles and progress, and I tried to make everything I did relatable. Slowly but surely, people started following me. They liked my authenticity, my real person approach to fitness, and the fact that I wasn't just pushing a perfect lifestyle. I was just showing up every day, doing my best. After about 6 months of consistent content creation, I hit my first milestone. I had grown my Instagram following to about 10,000 people. It wasn't a massive following, but it was enough for me to start thinking about monetizing it. So, I launched my first paid program, a 30-day workout challenge. It was basic, affordable, and something I knew my audience would love. The launch was modest, but it brought in some extra cash, and more importantly, it proved to me that people were willing to pay for what I offered. But I wasn't content with just a 30-day challenge. I wanted to scale up. I started creating more comprehensive programs, focusing on different aspects of fitness, strength training, flexibility, weight loss, and nutrition. I began offering one-on-one coaching for those who wanted more personalized attention. With each new offering, I worked harder to refine my services and make sure my clients were getting the best results possible. The business continued to grow, and so did my confidence. But growth wasn't without its challenges. One of the biggest obstacles I faced early on was time management. I was still working my full-time job, so every spare moment I had was spent working on my business. I would stay up late answering emails, recording workout videos, and designing new programs. I felt like I was constantly running on empty, but I also felt alive in a way I never had before. The grind was exhausting, but it was also thrilling. Every new sale, every positive feedback from a client made me feel like I was on the right path. After about a year, I realized that I couldn't keep juggling both my day job and my growing business. The business was starting to demand more attention, and I was beginning to feel the weight of the dual responsibilities. It was a tough decision, but I decided to quit my day job and go full-time with my fitness coaching business. The transition wasn't easy. The financial uncertainty was terrifying. I had a few months' worth of savings, but there was no guarantee that my business would continue to grow at the rate it had been. But I knew I had to go all in. I had to take the leap if I wanted to see how far I could go. With more time to dedicate to my business, things started to take off. I refined my marketing strategies, improved my client experience, and continued to create high-quality content. Within 6 months of going full-time, I had tripled my income. I hired a virtual assistant to help with administrative tasks, which freed up more of my time to focus on coaching and creating content. I started collaborating with other influencers in the fitness industry, expanding my reach even further. By year 2, my business had grown beyond what I could have imagined. I had a team, a full suite of online programs, and a client roster that included people from all over the world. I even started hosting live fitness events, which became a huge success. I was living the dream I had always wanted, the freedom to work on my terms, doing something I was passionate about, and helping others along the way. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned throughout this journey. There were so many times I could have given up. I faced doubt, fear, and failure. But each setback taught me something valuable. I learned that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of hard work, consistency, and taking risks. Most importantly, I learned that your passion can be your greatest asset, but only if you're willing to put in the work to turn it into something more. If there's one thing I want others to take away from my story, it's this. You don't need to have it all figured out from the beginning. You just need to start. You don't need to be an expert or have all the credentials. You just need to be willing to learn, adapt, and keep pushing forward. The hardest part is taking that first step, but once you do, it all becomes a little bit easier. Now, I'm living the life I always dreamed of, and it's more rewarding than I could have ever imagined. And it all started with that simple decision to take a risk and try something new. I was 28, stuck in a dead-end job I hated, and unsure of what I was doing with my life. I had just finished my MBA, and instead of landing the high-paying corporate job I'd imagined, I found myself working as a junior project manager at a company that barely paid my bills. The work was uninspiring, the hours were long, and I spent most of my time doing tasks that didn't match my skill set. I knew I wasn't living up to my potential, but I also knew that quitting and starting something new seemed like a pipe dream. Then came the pivotal moment, January 2019. I remember it vividly. I had just finished another one of those "you're doing great" meetings with my manager. I was staring out the window when it hit me. I didn't want to wake up every day to this. It was a gut punch. I wasn't going to climb the corporate ladder. I wasn't going to retire at 65 with a fat pension. And, quite frankly, I didn't know if I was even good enough to build something from scratch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to try. So, I took a leap of faith. I started researching business ideas at night, reading blogs, listening to podcasts, and jotting down notes on my phone. For months, I had zero idea what I was doing, but I knew I needed to act on this gnawing desire to break free. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I came across a post by a small, unknown brand selling minimalist home decor. They had under 10,000 followers, but their products were high quality, their brand message was clear, and their engagement rates were through the roof. I was hooked. The light bulb went off. I would start my own e-commerce store. I had no background in design, no real expertise in product sourcing, and definitely no clue how to build a website. But the idea of building a brand, running my own show, and creating something meaningful drove me forward. I started by picking a niche I was passionate about, sustainable home products. I was all about eco-conscious living, and I knew this was an untapped market with growing potential. So, I started researching suppliers, manufacturers, and figuring out how I could create a small, curated collection of products that didn't just look good, but were also environmentally friendly. I had no clue what I was doing. I remember cold emailing suppliers, asking questions I thought were dumb, and trying to learn the ins and outs of dropshipping, branding, and digital marketing. The first major roadblock came when I realized that I didn't have a ton of savings. My MBA loan was still hanging over my head, and I didn't exactly have a cushion to fall back on. The little savings I had was quickly drained as I bought inventory, paid for the website, and launched Facebook ads that went nowhere. In those early days, it felt like I was throwing money into a black hole. The fear was paralyzing. But then something unexpected happened. I ran a small giveaway campaign on Instagram, giving away one of my eco-friendly products. It was a simple strategy, but it started gaining traction. People began following my page, tagging friends, and engaging with the content. Within a couple of weeks, I had my first sale. It wasn't much, just $50, but that was the moment I realized this could actually work. The next several months were a grind. I worked full-time during the day and worked on my business during the nights and weekends. My social life took a hit. I remember my friends constantly asking me to go out, but I couldn't afford the time. I was building something I believed in, and the sacrifices felt worth it. I spent countless hours tweaking the website, refining my branding, and trying to figure out what kind of content would resonate with my audience. I had no formal marketing experience, but but I used what little I knew and got creative. I shot product photos with my phone, used free editing apps, and tried to make the most of every dollar I spent on ads. By June 2019, I was making consistent sales, nothing life-changing, but enough to show me that I was onto something. The orders were trickling in, and I was slowly building a customer base. I still hadn't quit my day job, but I was getting close. It was at this point that I learned the importance of customer retention. Sure, getting new customers was crucial, but keeping them was what made the business sustainable. I started focusing more on customer service, handwritten thank you notes with every order, quick responses to customer queries, and an easy returns process. I also offered discounts to repeat buyers and started building an email list. As the months went on, I noticed that customers who had bought once were coming back. The repeat orders were growing. The turning point came in January 2020. I had just returned from a vacation where I spent most of my time reflecting on my business. I knew that if I was ever going to take this full-time, I needed to make some changes. I revamped my website, introduced new product lines, and started collaborating with influencers who aligned with my brand. The changes paid off. Traffic spiked, and the sales really started rolling in. I was finally making enough to sustain the business, and I could see a way out of my corporate job. In March 2020, just as the pandemic was unfolding, I made the decision to go full-time with my business. The timing was terrifying, but I had built a solid foundation, and I knew this was the right move. I knew that, if I didn't go for it now, I might never do it. The pandemic was a mixed blessing. While many businesses struggled, the demand for home goods surged. People were stuck at home and wanted to make their living spaces more comfortable. I capitalized on this trend, introducing new, affordable products and pushing my marketing efforts even harder. I started to see exponential growth. I hired a small team to help with order fulfillment, customer support, and marketing. Fast forward to 2023, and my business has grown far beyond what I ever imagined. We've expanded our product offerings, hired a full-time team, and even secured partnerships with larger retailers. Last year, we surpassed 6 figures in revenue. And while that number is exciting, the real reward has been the community I've built around the brand. I've had customers send me messages saying how much they love our products and how they've made their homes feel better, more sustainable. That's what keeps me going. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I wanted to quit, so many times when the fear of failure almost got the best of me. But here I am, living proof that with persistence, a willingness to learn, and a little bit of courage, anything is possible. I'm not saying it's easy, far from it, but it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about making the leap, just go for it. You might not have all the answers, you might not know exactly how to get there, but if you're willing to put in the work and stay consistent, you'll get there. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It's never going to come. Take the risk, learn from your mistakes, and trust that it will all pay off in the end. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. My name is Jake, and I've always been the type to chase after things that seemed impossible. I didn't come from money, and I certainly wasn't a genius, but I had an itch to build something meaningful. This is the story of how I went from working a dead-end job in a warehouse to owning a successful startup that revolutionized a small niche in the e-commerce world. It all started when I was 22. I had just dropped out of college because I couldn't get a handle on the structure of it. I felt like a fish out of water in those classrooms, and despite my best efforts, my grades reflected it. I didn't have a grand plan for my life. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to get out of the cycle I was in, waking up early, going to a job I hated, and barely scraping by paycheck to paycheck. At the time, I was working at a warehouse in my small hometown. The work wasn't hard, but it was soul-crushing. I spent 8 to 10 hours a day moving boxes and packing shipments. Most of the time, I'd zone out and dream about doing something else with my life. But what could I do? I didn't have the resources, the connections, or the skills to take a leap into something new. Then, one day, I had a conversation that changed everything. A coworker named Mark, who was about 10 years older than me, pulled me aside during lunch and said, "Jake, you're not going to make it here forever, right? You're too smart for this job." That comment hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't that I thought I was particularly special, It was just that I had never considered that someone else might believe I was capable of more. Mark was a guy who had been around the block. He had worked various odd jobs over the years, but he had recently started flipping products online through eBay and Amazon. It sounded like a simple side hustle, but something about it sparked my curiosity. I started asking questions. How did you get started? What kind of products did you sell? How do you make money? I realized pretty quickly that the world of online selling was vast and, at least from what Mark had described, didn't require a lot of upfront investment. I knew I needed to start small, so I began with one product. I researched the market and decided to sell phone accessories. At the time, there was a growing trend of people buying cheap phone cases and screen protectors from China and selling them for a markup on platforms like eBay. I found a supplier on Alibaba, placed a small order for 200 phone cases, and set up my eBay store. The first month was a disaster. I barely sold anything, and I spent more money on advertising than I made in sales. I thought about quitting many times, but every time I felt like throwing in the towel, I remembered Mark's words. "You're too smart for this job," and I knew I couldn't let him down, or more importantly, myself. I spent nights reading articles, watching YouTube tutorials, and learning everything I could about e-commerce. I started tweaking my listings, improving my product descriptions, and investing in better photography. Slowly but surely, sales began trickling in. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was making enough to cover my costs and reinvest into the business. The feeling of making my first sale was something I'll never forget. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was proof that I could succeed at something beyond the warehouse. By the end of my second year, I had gained enough momentum to quit my job at the warehouse. I rented a small office space and hired a part-time assistant to help me manage orders. Business was growing steadily, but it wasn't without its struggles. There were days when I wasn't sure if I was going to make payroll or if my suppliers would ship on time. The learning curve was steep, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way. There were times when I'd order a product that turned out to be a complete dud, or when I'd miscalculate my advertising budget and end up losing money. But I was always determined to keep going. Fast forward a few more years, and I had expanded my product range. I wasn't just selling phone accessories anymore. I was selling a variety of tech gadgets, home office supplies, and other niche products. My business had grown from a small side hustle into a full-fledged e-commerce store. I was no longer just selling on eBay. I had my own website, was selling on Amazon, and had even started running my own ads on Google and Facebook. The turning point came when I noticed a gap in the market. There were tons of generic tech accessories out there, but very few that stood out in terms of design and quality. I decided to create my own line of premium phone cases. They would be eco-friendly, stylish, and made of durable materials. I worked with a designer to create a few prototypes, and after months of testing, I launched my own brand, Slickcase. Slickcase was an instant hit. People loved the designs, and they were willing to pay a premium for a product that wasn't just functional, but also visually appealing. My brand started to take off, and before long, I was doing 6 figures in monthly sales. I was able to quit all my other side businesses and focus exclusively on growing Slickcase. But success didn't come easily. There were plenty of challenges along the way. In my third year of business, I faced a major setback when a competitor launched a similar product at a lower price. I had to rework my marketing strategy, improve my product line, and really double down on customer service to retain my loyal base. It wasn't until I started offering personalized designs and creating limited edition cases that I found a niche within my niche. People loved the idea of having a phone case that felt unique to them. I also had to learn how to scale my operations. At first, I handled everything myself: product design, marketing, order fulfillment, customer service. But as the business grew, I realized I needed to hire a team. I brought in people who were experts in areas where I was weak, like supply chain management, digital marketing, and product development. That was when things really started to click. Today, Slickcase is a thriving brand with a team of 15 employees. We've expanded into international markets and have partnerships with major retailers. The road hasn't been easy, but the journey has been worth it. Looking back, I realize how far I've come. I used to spend my days dreaming about doing something better, and now I wake up every day excited to run my business. I didn't have a silver spoon, a fancy degree, or a ton of money to start with. What I had was determination, a willingness to learn, and the ability to adapt. And while I'm proud of what I've built, I'm also thankful for the small moments along the way, the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, the failures that taught me valuable lessons. In the moments when I thought I was at rock bottom but managed to keep going. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. If you have a vision and the grit to make it happen, you can turn your dreams into reality. It's not about having all the answers from day one. It's about taking the first step, learning as you go, and never giving up. So, for anyone out there thinking about taking that leap, whether you're stuck in a job you hate or just feeling stuck in life, take that first step. You won't regret it. I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was always the sensible one, the one who followed the rules, went to college, and took the traditional route to a stable job. I graduated with a degree in business administration, and by the age of 25, I had secured a well-paying job at a mid-sized marketing firm. The salary was great, the benefits were solid, and it seemed like the kind of job I was supposed to want. But after a few years of routine, I found myself miserable. It wasn't that I hated the work, but it felt unfulfilling. The company had been around for years, and the job was just a cog in a machine. I was stuck in a cycle of meetings, reports, and endless emails. There was no real sense of purpose or excitement. I began to ask myself, is this all there is? The wake-up call came one rainy afternoon. I had just wrapped up a grueling project that I thought would impress the higher-ups. Instead of receiving praise, I got a long list of things that still needed to be fixed. I sat in my cubicle, staring at my computer screen, feeling like I had just wasted months of my life. That was the moment I decided something had to change. I couldn't keep doing this for the next 30 years. I had to find a way to take control of my own life. But how? I had no idea. The only thing I knew was that I loved food. I'd always been passionate about cooking, and I had spent years experimenting with recipes, exploring new ingredients, and cooking for friends and family. In fact, it was one of the few things that made me feel alive. So, I decided to take a leap of faith and try something completely different. I would start my own business, specifically a food business. But not just any food business. I wanted to create something that blended my love for cooking with my growing interest in health and wellness. The idea hit me one night as I was watching a documentary about the rise of plant-based diets. I had experimented with plant-based cooking before, and I had seen firsthand how great it could be for both your health and the planet. I knew there was a growing trend in plant-based foods, but it still felt like a niche market. That's when it clicked. I would start a plant-based meal delivery service that catered to busy professionals like me, people who wanted to eat healthy, but just didn't have the time to cook. I'll be honest, the first few months were a blur. I had no background in the food industry, no culinary training, and no real business experience. All I had was a dream, a few savings, and a deep belief that I could make this work. I started small. I reached out to local suppliers, bought ingredients in bulk, and began experimenting with recipes. Every evening after work, I would cook meals in my tiny apartment kitchen. It was exhausting. I would cook all night, package everything, and then deliver it the next morning before heading to my day job. At first, there were only a few customers. My friends and family were my first clients, and I was constantly tweaking the menu, trying to perfect the recipes. But as word spread, more and more people began reaching out. I remember my first big order, 10 meals for a local office. I had been working on my website for weeks, and when the order came through, I couldn't believe it. It felt like I was on the verge of something huge. The next few months were a mix of successes and failures. I learned quickly how difficult it was to juggle a full-time job with running a business. There were days when I would be up all night prepping meals, then go straight to the office the next day. I was exhausted. But with every meal I delivered, I could see the potential of what I was building. The feedback from customers was overwhelmingly positive, and that kept me going. One of the biggest challenges was scaling. I had a hard time keeping up with the demand. I couldn't cook and deliver everything myself anymore. So, I hired a part-time assistant to help with prep and delivery. Slowly, I transitioned from cooking in my kitchen to renting a commercial kitchen space. It was a huge financial commitment, but it was necessary if I wanted to grow. At the same time, I started focusing more on marketing. I had no real budget for ads, so I turned to social media. I began posting photos of my meals, sharing recipes, and connecting with influencers in the health and wellness space. I also invested time in building an email list and creating a blog where I could talk about nutrition, plant-based living, and my own journey as an entrepreneur. By the end of 2020, the business had grown exponentially. I was no longer working full-time at the marketing firm. I had taken the plunge and left my job to focus on my food business full-time. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I could see that my dream was becoming a reality. In 2021, I made another big decision. I would expand my menu to offer more diverse plant-based options, including snacks, smoothies, and desserts. I also started offering meal plans for people with specific dietary needs, like gluten-free or high-protein diets. It was a risky move, but it paid off. As the business grew, I expanded my team, hired a full-time chef, and brought on a marketing expert to help scale the brand. We started offering nationwide delivery, and I even began working with larger corporate clients who wanted to provide healthy meals to their employees. By 2023, I was shocked by how far I had come. What started as a small side project had turned into a thriving business. We had hundreds of customers across the country, and our meals were regularly featured in health and wellness magazines. But the most fulfilling part was seeing how many lives we were impacting. People were losing weight, feeling better, and making healthier choices because of the meals we provided. I had created something meaningful, and it was making a difference. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be running a successful plant-based meal delivery service, I would have laughed. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started, but I knew that I had a passion for something, and that passion drove me forward. There were countless obstacles along the way, financial struggles, self-doubt, and the overwhelming feeling of being in over my head, but I kept pushing through. Today, I'm not just an entrepreneur. I'm a person who has built something that truly matters. And it all started with a simple decision to follow my passion. So, to anyone out there who feels stuck in a job they hate, or who thinks they're not good enough to start something new, just take the leap. You might not have all the answers, and it won't be easy, but if you believe in yourself and keep working, you can make it happen. Don't wait for the perfect time. There's no such thing. Just start and keep going. I was 24 years old, living in a small apartment in the heart of the city. I had just finished my degree in business administration, and while I had dreams of becoming an entrepreneur, I felt completely lost. It wasn't that I didn't have ideas. I had tons of them. The problem was I didn't have the resources, the experience, or even a clear plan. All I had was a gut feeling that I could make something of myself, but the road ahead was murky at best. One day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. My city was full of small businesses, cafes, boutiques, food trucks, you name it. There was something about the energy of the streets that inspired me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew I wanted to create something of my own. As I walked down a particularly busy street, I passed by a coffee shop with a sign that read, "Locally sourced, freshly brewed." That phrase stuck with me, and as I stared at the sign, an idea formed in my mind. The idea was simple, a mobile coffee shop. I knew that coffee was a daily ritual for most people, and there was something appealing about the convenience of having coffee on the go. The key, I realized, would be to offer a unique experience, something more than just a cup of coffee. I wanted it to be high quality, affordable, and most importantly, fast. People were always in a rush, and the idea of being able to grab a fresh cup of coffee while going about their day seemed like something that could take off. I went home that evening with a fire in my stomach. The next day, I began researching everything I could about the coffee industry, mobile businesses, and the logistics of operating a food truck. I was shocked at how much I didn't know. I didn't even know the first thing about brewing coffee, let alone how to run a mobile coffee shop. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I took a part-time job at a local cafe to learn the ropes, and I began saving every penny I could to invest in my dream. Months went by, and I was finally ready to take the plunge. I saved up enough to buy a used van, which I converted into a mobile coffee truck. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. I had also spent hours learning how to brew coffee, how to set up the truck, and how to market my business. But there was one problem. I had no idea how to get customers. I knew that the competition was fierce, with established coffee chains dominating the market. How could I possibly stand out? Then it hit me. I needed to be everywhere. I started by reaching out to local events, food markets, and festivals. I offered to sponsor some of these events by providing free coffee in exchange for exposure. At first, the response was lukewarm. People didn't really know who I was, and I had to work hard to convince them that my coffee was worth trying. But as I kept showing up, word started to spread. The breakthrough came when I parked my truck near a popular park on a sunny weekend. The line for coffee was long, and I was so busy I could barely keep up. People loved the fact that they could grab a cup of coffee while walking their dogs or meeting friends. That was the moment when I realized I had something special. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and that's when I knew I could make this work. Over the next few months, things really started to take off. I expanded my menu to include pastries and sandwiches, and I began catering to corporate offices and events. I hired a few part-time baristas to help with the growing demand, and I reinvested every penny into the business. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. Managing a food truck, dealing with customers, maintaining quality, and juggling all the logistical details took a toll on me. I was working 16-hour days, barely sleeping, and constantly feeling like I was drowning. At one point, I almost gave up. There were days when I wondered if it was all worth it. The pressure was overwhelming, and I had no one to turn to for advice. My family was supportive, but they didn't really understand the intricacies of running a business. I was on my own, figuring things out as I went along. Then, one day, I met a fellow entrepreneur at a local networking event. She had started a successful food delivery service, and we hit it off immediately. She became my mentor, offering advice and guidance that I desperately needed. She helped me streamline my operations, find better suppliers, and even negotiate better deals for things like insurance and vehicle maintenance. With her help, I was able to focus on the bigger picture and scale my business. The next year was a game changer. I expanded my fleet of trucks, hired a full-time operations manager, and began offering franchising opportunities. My business was no longer just a side project. It was a legitimate company. I finally had the breathing room I needed to think strategically, and I began investing in branding, social media, and marketing campaigns to take my business to the next level. Today, my coffee business has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We have a fleet of trucks serving coffee all over the city, and we've expanded to several other cities as well. We offer premium coffee, artisanal pastries, and even custom coffee blends that customers can order online. But the journey has been anything but easy. There have been countless setbacks, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But through it all, I've learned one thing. The key to success is persistence. It's about showing up every day, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up. Looking back, I never would have imagined that my small idea for a mobile coffee shop would turn into what it is today. But it all started with a simple walk down the street, an idea, and the determination to make it work. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back. If you have an idea, go for it. It won't be easy, but if you stay persistent, you'll get there. Now, as I sit in my office overlooking the city, I can't help but smile. The road was long, but every moment was worth it. I still love what I do, and I'm grateful every day for the chance to continue building my dream. The best part? I get to share that dream with others, my employees, my customers, and the many people who've supported me along the way. My coffee truck is no longer just a business. It's a symbol of what's possible when you don't give up. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, know that it's not going to be easy. There will be times when you'll question everything, but you have to keep pushing forward. Trust in yourself, keep learning, and most importantly, stay consistent. Success doesn't happen overnight, but with hard work and dedication, it's absolutely within reach. And that's how I went from a broke, lost 24-year-old to owning a multi-city coffee business. The journey is never easy, but it's always worth it. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought I would be where I am today. I always considered myself to be a small-town guy, with a steady job and a simple routine. Growing up, I watched my parents work hard to make ends meet. They never had much, but they always made sure we were provided for. They taught me the importance of a steady paycheck and a comfortable, predictable life. The idea of stepping out of my comfort zone to take risks was never something I entertained, until one day, it just clicked. I was 28, working as a sales manager at a mid-level tech company. The pay was decent, and I had a decent life. But something was missing. I felt trapped. The endless cycle of 9 to 5, the meetings, the reports, the constant grind, it was beginning to wear on me. On paper, my life seemed fine, but on the inside, I felt like I was wasting my time. Every day, I saw the same faces, heard the same complaints, and performed the same tasks. There had to be more to life than this, right? The idea of starting my own business had always been on the back of my mind. I had dabbled in side projects here and there, buying and selling things on eBay, trying to create an online store. But those attempts never went anywhere. I would get excited, try for a few weeks, and then burn out when things didn't go as planned. I had the drive, but not the right direction. Until one day, that all changed. It was the summer of 2017 when I decided to finally go all in. I was at a breaking point. I was tired of working for someone else, tired of answering to a boss, and tired of feeling like I was meant for more. I had been working in tech for years, so I knew the ins and outs of the industry. But what if I could combine my passion for tech with my interest in e-commerce and build something of my own? I didn't know what that something was yet, but I knew I had to figure it out. I remember the moment I came up with the idea. I was at a family barbecue, sitting next to my cousin who had been telling me about his new fitness journey. He had lost a lot of weight using fitness apps and online coaching, and it got me thinking. There was a growing trend in fitness technology, with more and more people turning to apps and online programs to track their workouts, monitor their diet, and stay motivated. But what I realized was that while there were plenty of apps and online services, they all seemed to fall short when it came to one thing: personalization. That's when the idea for a personalized fitness coaching platform came to me. A platform that not only provided workout routines and meal plans, but also tailored them specifically to each user's unique goals, body type, and fitness level. It seemed simple enough, but I knew there would be a lot of work ahead of me to make it a reality. I spent the next few weeks researching, learning everything I could about the fitness industry, app development, and online coaching. I read articles, watched YouTube videos, and even reached out to a few experts who could help me get started. I wasn't exactly a tech guru, but I had a basic understanding of software development, so I decided to start small. I didn't have a huge budget, but I had enough to build a basic prototype and hire a freelance developer to help with the technical side. The first version of my platform was rough, really rough. It was a basic website with a few features, but it got the job done. I started marketing it to my friends and family, offering them free trials in exchange for feedback. At first, only a handful of people signed up, but it was enough to give me the encouragement I needed to keep going. I used their feedback to improve the platform, adding new features, fixing bugs, and making the experience more seamless. But just as things started to look promising, I hit a major roadblock. The initial costs were higher than I had anticipated. My savings were quickly draining, and I wasn't bringing in enough revenue to cover expenses. I was faced with a tough decision. Do I quit and return to my steady job, or do I take on more debt and push through the tough times? It was a gamble, but I chose to take out a small business loan to keep things going. I doubled down, working long hours during the day while still managing my full-time job, and then staying up late to work on the platform at night. I knew this was my shot. If I didn't give it everything I had, I'd always wonder what might have been. The next few months were brutal. There were nights when I barely slept, just working nonstop to improve the platform. I made mistakes, plenty of them. There were times when I felt like I was wasting my time, but I kept pushing. And then, one day, it all clicked. I made a breakthrough in marketing. I partnered with a popular fitness influencer who agreed to try out my platform in exchange for a small commission. Within days, the traffic to my website spiked. People were signing up, and I started seeing real revenue for the first time. That was the moment I realized I was onto something. From there, it was a steady climb. As my user base grew, I reinvested everything back into the business, hiring a team of developers, improving the platform, and expanding the features. We introduced new coaching plans, added personalized nutrition tracking, and created a mobile app. Slowly but surely, the business gained traction. By 2019, I had enough clients to quit my full-time job and focus on my startup full-time. But that wasn't the end of the journey. In fact, it felt like the real work was just beginning. There were new challenges every day: competition, scaling, customer retention, and the ever-present pressure of making the right decisions. But with every obstacle came a lesson, and with every victory came a sense of fulfillment I had never known before. In 2021, the platform officially became profitable, and by 2022, we were helping thousands of people improve their fitness, track their progress, and achieve their goals. We had become a well-known brand in the fitness tech space, and I had built something I was truly proud of. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the impact we were having on people's lives. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be running a successful tech startup, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. The journey was full of uncertainty, hard work, and countless sleepless nights. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, if you're sitting there thinking you're not cut out for entrepreneurship, or that it's too late to start, trust me, it's never too late. Take the leap. Find your passion. And just keep going. The road will be tough, but the rewards will make it all worth it. A few years ago, I found myself sitting in my cramped apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and stacks of papers with half-scribbled business ideas. I had just quit my 9-to-5 job as a marketing associate, convinced that I was going to change the world with a startup that would make millions. You know, the typical story. Everyone's got that "I'll never work for anyone again" moment, and it was mine. But let me tell you, it didn't happen the way I expected. I was never one of those serial entrepreneurs with $1 million idea. I wasn't the type to launch my business in my early 20s with a tech unicorn concept. I didn't even have the perfect business plan when I quit. All I knew was that I had this overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction working for someone else, and I needed to make something for myself. The only thing I had going for me was a passion for problem solving and a deep fear of failure. And honestly, that last part became my fuel. When I left my corporate job, I didn't have a lot of savings. I was living paycheck to paycheck at the time. I had about $3,000 in my bank account, and I knew that I had to make it stretch. With that limited budget, I spent countless hours researching different business models. I read books, watched YouTube videos, and spent way too much time on Reddit trying to figure out what niche I could break into. I had no idea what I wanted to do exactly, but I knew I didn't want to waste my chance. For a while, I thought about going into digital marketing. It seemed like a safe bet considering my background. But there was one thing that kept bothering me. Everyone seemed to be doing it. There were thousands of marketing agencies out there. How could I stand out? I didn't want to spend my days sending cold emails to clients who weren't interested in what I was offering. Then, out of nowhere, I stumbled upon something that would change everything for me. I was scrolling through Instagram one night, feeling particularly low, when I saw a post about online marketplaces. It was about selling handmade or unique products, something that caught my attention immediately. I started looking into platforms like Etsy, eBay, and Amazon, and it clicked. I could start a business selling products, but not just any products I could make myself. I'd always been good at crafting small things. My apartment was full of candles, custom notebooks, and a few framed prints I had made for myself. I got this idea. Why not take something I enjoyed doing as a hobby and turn it into a side hustle? I could make custom candles, scented, colorful, and aesthetically pleasing, and sell them online. It seemed simple enough. So, with the little money I had left, I bought supplies, wax, wicks, dyes, and fragrances. I watched YouTube tutorials on how to make candles properly, tested a few batches, and before long, I had a handful of candles ready to sell. I created an Etsy shop called Serenity Scents, hoping that the name would evoke some calming image. My first product photos were awful, taken with an old iPhone in terrible lighting. But I didn't let that discourage me. I wrote a quirky product description, focusing on how each candle was hand-poured with love and designed to create a peaceful ambience. I uploaded the products, hit the publish button, and waited. I didn't expect much. Maybe 1 or 2 sales, at most. To my surprise, I got my first order within a week. It wasn't much, just one small candle, but I was thrilled. I celebrated that first sale like it was a huge achievement. I packed the candle, wrote a thank you note, and sent it off, feeling like I had just made my first step into the world of entrepreneurship. But then, a month passed, and nothing happened. No sales. No inquiries. The store was basically dead. I started to feel the weight of reality setting in. I had just quit my job, and now my side hustle was flatlining. I started thinking that maybe I wasn't cut out for this after all. But I wasn't ready to give up. Instead of throwing in the towel, I decided to do some serious market research. I visited other successful candle shops, studied their product pages, social media accounts, and everything I could get my hands on. I saw that the successful sellers had professional-looking photos, strong branding, and a loyal following on Instagram. I knew I needed to step up my game. So, I invested the last bit of my savings into upgrading my photos. I bought a decent camera, learned how to use natural light for better shots, and got creative with props to make my candles look appealing. I also created an Instagram account for my brand and started posting consistently. I connected with other small business owners, engaged with my followers, and slowly built a community around my products. It didn't happen overnight. It took months before I saw any real growth. But then, something amazing happened. My candles started to gain traction. People started sharing their purchases on social media. I got a few more orders, then a few more after that. Eventually, I reached a point where I was consistently selling out of my products. By the end of my first year, I had grown my business from a hobby into a full-time income. I was no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and I had expanded my product line to include bath bombs, custom journals, and other handmade goods. Looking back, I see how much I've grown. I went from having no idea what I was doing to running a successful e-commerce business. The journey was filled with doubt, fear, and countless sleepless nights, but I wouldn't change a thing. I think the key to my success was never giving up. There were so many moments where I could have walked away. When the sales were slow, when the failures piled up, and when I felt like no one was listening. But I kept pushing forward, kept learning, and kept improving. Now, Serenity since has grown beyond what I ever imagined. I've built a team of 5 people, and we've expanded into wholesale and corporate gifting. I still work on the creative side of the business, but I've learned to delegate and trust my team. I've even started a second business offering workshops for other small business owners. The road wasn't easy, and I still face challenges every day, but I'm proud of how far I've come. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that success isn't always about having the perfect idea. It's about perseverance. If you're thinking about starting a business, don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be one. Just start. And don't be afraid to fail. Because every failure is just a lesson in disguise. I never considered myself an entrepreneur. I didn't have some grand vision or a burning desire to change the world. I just wanted to be comfortable, to not worry about bills or being stuck in a job I didn't enjoy. But sometimes life has a way of pushing you in a direction you never thought you'd go. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everybody knew everybody, and you followed a certain path. Graduate high school, go to college, get a job, and maybe get married and have kids. That's what people did. So, after high school, I went to college, got my degree in marketing, and found a solid job as a marketing coordinator at a tech company. I was 24, living in a city I loved, and everything seemed fine. But inside, I felt like something was missing. The job wasn't bad, but it wasn't exciting either. I worked long hours in a small cubicle, crunching numbers and writing reports. Every day felt like the last, and I started to wonder if this was what I had been working toward all my life. I began to get frustrated. I had a steady paycheck, health benefits, and all the things people dream of, but I was bored. And more importantly, I was scared. I didn't want to get stuck in a career I hated, working for someone else for the next 40 years. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post from a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She was traveling the world, running a business from her laptop, and living what appeared to be the perfect life. It was one of those good for you but bad for me moments. I couldn't help but think, how does she do it? She didn't have a special degree or any connections. She had simply taken a leap of faith and figured it out. That night, I started researching how to start an online business. I had no idea where to begin. I wasn't tech-savvy, and I didn't have a clue about the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, but I was determined to figure it out. I watched countless YouTube videos, read blog posts, and took some basic online courses. And after a few weeks of research, I stumbled across dropshipping. The concept seemed perfect. No inventory, no shipping, just set up an online store, and when someone ordered, the supplier shipped it directly to the customer. It seemed simple enough. It was also cheap to get started, which was appealing since I didn't have much money to spare. I spent the next month building my first e-commerce store. I remember staying up late, trying to figure out how to set up payment processing and design the website. There were so many moments when I wanted to quit. The tech side of things frustrated me, and I doubted my ability to make it work. But I pushed through. I spent hours finding suppliers, choosing products, and designing my store to look professional. Finally, after weeks of effort, my store was ready to go live. I felt a sense of excitement mixed with dread. I had invested a little bit of money and a lot of time. I launched the site and shared it on social media, crossing my fingers that people would buy something. And then I waited. And waited. The first few days were nothing short of discouraging. No sales, no traffic, just crickets. I started to feel like a failure. But I didn't give up. Instead, I started researching more about marketing and paid ads. I learned that Instagram and Facebook ads were the best way to drive traffic to my store, so I began testing ads with small budgets. At first, it was a disaster. I lost money, and no one was buying. But slowly, after tweaking my approach and targeting the right audience, the sales started coming in. It wasn't a flood of orders, but it was something. By the end of the first month, I made a total of $500 in sales. It wasn't enough to quit my day job, but it felt like a breakthrough. I started reinvesting that money into ads and expanding my product range. I realized I had to think outside of the box and find ways to stand out from the competition. I focused on niche products that I knew would resonate with specific audiences. Slowly but surely, my business started to grow. A few months later, I was making enough money to quit my job. It wasn't a huge income, but it was enough to support myself and pay the bills. I remember the day I handed in my resignation letter. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. I had no backup plan. My business was my plan. There were so many unknowns, but I had taken the first step toward freedom. I kept pushing forward, learning from my mistakes and improving my processes. I found suppliers who were reliable and improved the customer experience. I optimized my ads, created a brand, and started building an email list. I was working harder than I ever had, but I was finally doing something I loved. By the end of the year, my dropshipping business had turned into a full-fledged brand. I wasn't just selling random products anymore. I was curating a collection of items that resonated with a specific group of people. My customer base was growing, and I was getting great feedback. I felt like I had finally figured it out. In the next year, I scaled my business even further. I started hiring a team of virtual assistants to handle customer service and operations, which freed up my time to focus on marketing and product development. I expanded into new markets and started a subscription service, which was a huge hit. Sales were growing exponentially, and I could see the potential to make this my life's work. But as I grew, I also encountered new challenges. The bigger my business became, the more I had to manage. I had to learn to delegate, to trust my team, and to make tough decisions. There were moments when I wondered if I was in over my head. The stress of managing a growing company while maintaining a personal life was overwhelming at times. But I reminded myself why I started in the first place, to create something of my own and take control of my life. 3 years later, my business is thriving. I've been able to travel, hire a team, and even launch new product lines. My income has multiplied, and my life is completely different from what it was before. I still face challenges, but now they feel like opportunities to grow. When I look back on that day, I decided to take the leap. I'm proud of myself for pushing through the fear and uncertainty. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, it's worth it. I didn't have some great plan or a crystal ball showing me the way forward. I just took a chance and kept going. If there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this: take the leap, even if you're scared. There's no perfect time, no perfect plan, but there's always the potential to build something amazing if you're willing to work for it. I never thought I'd end up where I am now. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what I saw myself doing, I would have said I was going to be working a 9-to-5 job in a boring office somewhere, likely trying to climb up the corporate ladder like everyone else. But life has a funny way of turning your plans upside down, and sometimes you end up exactly where you were meant to be, even if you don't realize it at first. It all started when I was 27. I had just finished a degree in marketing, and after a few years working in a corporate environment, I felt stuck. The pay was decent, the benefits were solid, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. Every morning I'd wake up dreading the thought of sitting in front of a computer screen for another 8 hours, clicking through emails, attending pointless meetings, and responding to customer queries. It was the kind of job that paid the bills but drained you mentally and emotionally. One night, after a particularly stressful day at work, I found myself scrolling through Reddit, as you do when you just want to numb your brain. I stumbled across a thread where people were talking about their side hustles, their passions, and how they managed to turn small projects into full-time incomes. Some were selling handmade products online, others were offering freelance services, and a few had even managed to launch full-blown companies. I started reading through these stories, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a while: hope. I had always been interested in photography, but I never thought I could make money from it. I had a decent camera, and I loved taking pictures in my free time, but it was just a hobby, right? The idea of turning that hobby into something more seemed impossible. But the more I read, the more I realized that people had been able to turn their passion projects into full-time careers. It didn't take a huge upfront investment or a fancy business degree. All it took was a bit of creativity, hustle, and a willingness to take risks. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I took my photography seriously? What if I started offering services to people? I could shoot weddings, events, portraits, anything really. The idea started to consume me, and by the end of the week, I had set up an Instagram account and a simple website. I posted some of my best work, and I started promoting myself to friends and family. I had no clue what I was doing, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I posted photos I thought were good, offered discounts to people I knew, and slowly started to build a portfolio. At first, it was tough. I barely got any inquiries, and the ones I did get didn't pay much. But I kept at it, constantly tweaking my website, my social media strategy, and my approach to marketing. I learned everything I could about SEO, social media algorithms, and building an online presence. I remember my first paid gig. A friend of a friend needed photos for a local event, and they agreed to pay me $100. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I showed up with my camera, nervous as hell, but did the best job I could. When I sent the photos over, the client was thrilled. That felt amazing. They even referred me to a couple of other people. Slowly but surely, I started getting more clients, and my business began to grow. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were plenty of moments where I wanted to quit. It's easy to romanticize the idea of being your own boss, but the reality is that it's incredibly hard work. There were days when I had no clients, weeks when I made no money, and months where I doubted myself. But each time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wanted freedom, I wanted flexibility, and I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. As the months went on, I got more confident, and my portfolio expanded. I started charging more for my services, and eventually, I made enough money to quit my full-time job. That was a huge milestone for me. I took the leap, left my stable job, and decided to go all in on my photography business. There were still challenges, of course. The competition was fierce, and it was hard to differentiate myself from other photographers. But I figured out that my niche was capturing authentic moments. Instead of focusing on stiff, posed photos like many photographers, I started focusing on real, raw moments. Whether it was a couple laughing at their wedding or a family sharing a quiet moment together, I made sure my photos told a story. That's what set me apart. As my business grew, I started branching out into other areas. I began offering photo editing services, creating photography tutorials, and even started a YouTube channel to share my experiences with other aspiring photographers. I also hired a couple of people to help with the workload, like an assistant to help me with post-production and an admin person to handle scheduling and client communication. One of the biggest game changers for my business was learning how to scale. I had always been hesitant to expand, thinking that I had to do everything myself, but I realized that to truly grow, I needed to outsource. Delegating tasks freed up my time to focus on what I was really good at, taking photos and building my brand. I also started automating a lot of the marketing and client management processes, which saved me a ton of time. Today, I run a successful photography business with a team, and I'm constantly amazed at how far I've come. I travel around the world for photo shoots, I work with incredible clients, and I get to wake up every day excited about what I do. I've built something from the ground up, and I'm proud of it. Looking back, I can't believe how much my life has changed. It wasn't an overnight success, and there were plenty of times I thought about giving up. But I kept pushing forward, and now I get to live the life I always dreamed of on my own terms. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that if you have a passion, a little bit of determination, and a willingness to learn, you can turn almost anything into a successful business. I still can't believe this is my life now. I'm living proof that you don't need to follow the traditional path to success. Sometimes, the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. I had always been the type of person who played it safe. Growing up in a small town, I was taught to follow the conventional path, go to school, get a stable job, save up, and one day retire comfortably. But deep down, I always knew that the safe route wasn't for me. The idea of living a life where I just worked for a paycheck and didn't truly own my time seemed suffocating. The turning point came when I hit 30. I was working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company. The job was decent, the benefits were good, and the pay was enough to live comfortably. But there was a constant feeling in the back of my mind that I was meant to do something more. I wanted to build something of my own, but the thought of quitting my stable job and jumping into the unknown terrified me. One night, I was scrolling through social media when I saw an ad for a course on e-commerce and dropshipping. I had heard of dropshipping before, but I didn't know much about it. The ad promised that you could start your own online store with little upfront investment and sell products without ever touching inventory. The idea was fascinating, but I was skeptical. Could it really be that simple? Could I make a living doing this? I spent the next couple of weeks researching dropshipping. I watched YouTube videos, read blog posts, and joined Facebook groups where people were sharing their success stories. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who had quit their jobs and made six-figure incomes running e-commerce businesses from home. The more I learned, the more excited I became. I knew I had to try. The first step was the scariest, quitting my job. I had been with the company for 5 years, and the idea of leaving behind job security for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship felt like a leap of faith. But I did it. I put in my notice and set a date to leave. The relief was immediate, but it was also terrifying. For the first time in my life, I had to bet on myself. The next few weeks were a blur of excitement and uncertainty. I spent every waking hour building my online store. I watched countless tutorials on setting up an e-commerce site, how to find suppliers, and how to create Facebook ads. The first few days of launching my store were discouraging. I barely made any sales. I spent money on ads that didn't seem to convert. The initial excitement started to fade, and self-doubt crept in. Was I wasting my time? Should I go back to a regular job? But I stuck with it. I took the time to analyze what wasn't working, adjusted my marketing strategies, and focused on improving the user experience on my website. I started testing new ads with different targeting options. Slowly, things started to change. I made my first sale and then another. My excitement was through the roof. I remember jumping up and down when I saw that notification for my first sale. It felt like proof that this was possible. Over the next few months, my sales started to grow. I learned the ins and outs of running Facebook ads, and I started scaling my campaigns. I focused on improving my product offerings, made my website more user-friendly, and optimized my sales funnel. Eventually, the store became profitable. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to replace my old salary, which felt like a huge accomplishment. I had a sense of pride knowing that I had built something that was entirely mine. But that was just the beginning. As my sales grew, I realized that the key to long-term success wasn't just about making sales, it was about building a brand. I wanted to create a business that people trusted and loved. I started investing more in branding, customer service, and creating a unique identity for my store. Instead of just selling random products, I focused on finding a niche products that I believed in and that resonated with my audience. I also realized that I couldn't do it alone. As the business grew, I started outsourcing tasks. I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and another person to help with managing the ads. I even hired a graphic designer to create high-quality images and videos for my store. This allowed me to focus more on growing the business and less on the day-to-day tasks. Looking back, it wasn't always easy. There were plenty of moments when I felt like giving up. I struggled with imposter syndrome, especially when I saw other people in the space who seemed to have it all figured out. There were times when I felt overwhelmed and unsure of my decisions. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place, to build something of my own, to own my time, and to create the kind of life I had always dreamed of. Fast forward to today, and my dropshipping business is no longer just a side hustle, it's my full-time job. I make a comfortable living, and I'm able to travel and work from anywhere in the world. I've launched multiple product lines, expanded into other countries, and even started a second business in a completely different niche. I now have a small team of people who help me run the business, and I've been able to scale it beyond what I ever thought possible. One of the most rewarding aspects of entrepreneurship is the freedom it provides. I'm no longer tied to a 9-to-5 job, and I don't have to ask for time off to take a vacation. If I want to take a week off to travel or spend time with family, I can. And while the business still requires a lot of work, I now have the flexibility to work on my terms. Looking back, I'm grateful that I took the risk. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The journey wasn't always smooth, but I learned so much along the way. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes time, persistence, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. But if you're willing to put in the work, the rewards can be life-changing. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I encourage you to take the leap. It's scary, and there will be challenges, but the possibilities are endless. You just have to be willing to take that first step, even if you're not sure where it will lead. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.